when he's not damning you to hell. So I really wasn't able to figure out quite what was going on. But we had told the board attorney that if this was to go to the press, we could bet almost 100% that the headline would be, "You belong in hell." And so the first day that this came to the media, on November 15th, there was a story in the Jersey Journal, and on the front page it said "Hellbent." And we opened up to the story, and what do you think the title was? "You belong in hell." And so we were right on in that account. But the administration at this point knew that I had been having a lot of problems with students. They knew that I was being harassed. They knew that I was having a lot of problems with students and even teachers. But they didn't seem to want to do anything about it. As a matter of fact, they did the exact opposite. They appeared as if they were supporting the teacher and not supporting my attempt to make sure that he doesn't push his religious ideas on the students. Matter of fact, the superintendent of schools came out publicly and in a newspaper article said that this teacher was only teaching in the context of teaching history. All the things he said during those classes was in the context of teaching history. First thing, he said that he had never listened to the recording, so I don't know how he knows that. But second, I think that to say that it's acceptable to tell the students that they belong in hell if they disagree with him, that there's no context in which that's appropriate during any public school class, let alone a U.S. history class. But this situation continued for about a month, and a lot of the students were still angry, a lot of the people were still angry, and we went to some board meetings, and people were very, very upset. There were people holding signs supporting the teacher. There were even these kids that were maybe 6, 7, 8 years old holding up signs supporting the teacher, saying how terrible the ACLU is, just things like that. But on December 18th, everything changed because the New York Times ran the story. And that's when I started to get support from a lot of people in the New York, New Jersey area, but also even all over the world. I was surprised to get the amount of support that I did from all over the country, considering what I was experiencing just 10 miles away from Manhattan. It was quite a surprise. But in mid-January, the Board of Education decided they were going to come up with a solution to the problem. They made a policy that banned students from recording in the classroom without permission of the teacher. That's how they decided to deal with the problem. Not that the teacher did something wrong, but that the student did not have the right to record the classes. And obviously this made it worse for us for two reasons. Number one, we didn't like the idea, but the main point was that the only evidence that I had of this teacher doing this was the recordings that I made. And I remember one thing that my teacher specifically said in that meeting in the principal's office. He said, there are 25 students in that classroom, and I bet you that if we were to ask every single one of them if I had said these things in class, they would say I didn't. And the unfortunate part is I think he's right. And I don't know why, but I have to agree he was probably correct. What finally got the board actually moving, however, were two events that occurred in mid-February. And on President's Day, we attended a well-attended press conference, and we had a lot of supporters. We had the ACLU, we had a law firm called Wilkie Farr and Gallagher, People for the American Way. We had a lot of people who were willing to support us and back up my attempt. And the conference actually lasted more than an hour, which was a surprise. We didn't expect that, but it was well attended, and there was a lot of press that came out of it. But the following evening, I spoke at a Board of Education meeting, and this made the 10 and 11 o'clock news all over the New York, New Jersey metro area. The reason that I came to this meeting was to tell the board something. My teacher, Mr. Vescovich, had come out recently in the last edition of our local paper, The Observer, saying that he did not make any denials in that meeting in the principal's office. And at this point, it appeared to the people that I had no proof of what was going on, and so I felt kind of alone. So I went to that board meeting and I told them that I recorded that meeting too. I was really glad I did. Because if I had not had that recording, people could have perceivably called me a liar. And I would not have released that recording if the teacher had not denied making the denials. There were people online who were saying, where's your proof that the teacher made any of these denials? But I let that go. But once I realized that the teacher was going to come out and basically call me a liar publicly, I realized I had to do something. And so I let them know I recorded that too. But in any case, shortly after I gave the Board of Education this recording, they finally began to negotiate with us for a settlement. And we had never filed a lawsuit at this point. People claim that we had, but we've never filed a lawsuit. We filed a notice of claim which reserves our right to sue if we would have to. But the terms of the settlement, they were basically exactly what we had asked for in the beginning, but consequently a little bit more, because things had changed over time. Now this was a public issue. Now people were actually watching it, who were in the public and who were really concerned about this issue. Now I was being harassed. I even received a death threat from a student in my school. So things had to change, but the Board of Education did negotiate with us. One of the things that ended up changing in our agreement was a provision that required the Anti-Defamation League to come to our school to teach the teachers and the students about separation of church and state and the sciences. Well, we found out in the summer, way after we had settled this agreement, that the Anti-Defamation League could not come to our school to teach the students. They could still teach the teachers, but not the students. That by itself wasn't a problem. The problem was that we found out that the Board of Education was told by the Anti-Defamation League, before we even made the settlement, that they could not come to the school to teach the students. But the board did not tell us. So basically, the Board of Education entered an agreement knowing that they couldn't complete all the terms of the agreement, which is a pretty bad idea, to say the least. So I decided that instead of filing a lawsuit, which we could have done, I tried to seek a remedy for them. And what I ended up with were 3 speakers who agreed to come to our school to teach about these topics. One is separation of church and state, obviously. But 2, and this is very important as well, to teach the sciences, to teach evolution, and to have students understand what these things actually are. And so the 3 speakers that agreed to speak were what I'm going to say now. One is Dr. Charles Liu, and he's an associate at the Hayden Planetarium. And he's also a professor of astrophysics at the City University of New York. And he co-authored a book with Neil deGrasse Tyson, who is the director of the Hayden Planetarium. And actually, when the story came out, Professor Tyson actually wrote something in the New York Times specifically about my story, so I knew that he had agreed with what I'd done. And he came to speak this past February. Another one of the speakers was Dr. Kenneth Miller, and he's a biology professor at Brown University and was also the lead witness in the trial in Dover, Pennsylvania 2 years ago, the Kitzmiller versus Dover Area School District, where the textbooks had that disclaimer that they tried to put in saying that evolution is only a theory. So he not only was highly educated in the sciences, but also had a background in separation of church and state issues, so it was great to have him. And he came to speak to our school in October. And the third, but certainly not the last, is Reverend Barry Lynn. And he is the executive director of Americans United for Separation of Church and State. So that was very fitting to teach the separation of church and state to the students. And we proposed these names to our school board. And we asked that, like all assemblies that we have at our school, that the speaker be paid something, some kind of honorarium, thanking them for their time.